country in a way that hasn't been done since World War II. There's just absolutely no other way of putting it.
What is going on? I feel like that's what people across. What is going on here? Just really, what is going on between CQ Brown, and I'm just going to say it, was CQ, we need to ask the question, was CQ Brown fired because he was black? Because it's not that he's unqualified, right? It's not that he was confirmed by the Senate. And then when it comes to Ukraine, I just like, is Ronald Reagan rolling over in his grave right now? Where are the real Republicans in America? Where are the people that care about democracy? I am just, Rick Steele, I'm very confused and concerned.
Boy. So you got to talk about more outrage from the left. They're now boohoo, whining, and crying racism over President Trump firing General Charles Q. Brown as chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and other senior officers. Now, the reason why they're upset about this is because President Trump has said, you know what? We have to rid wokeness out of the military. And in order to do that, you have to fire the people that are responsible for maintaining that ideology and pushing that ideology within the military in the first place, right? And General Charles Q. Brown was one of the guys that was really big on racial quotas. And also on top of that, he's extremely woke.
Commander of Pacific Air Forces, a senior leader in our Air Force, and an African-American. Many of you may be wondering what I'm thinking about the current events surrounding the tragic death of George Floyd. I'm thinking about how full I am with emotion, not just for George Floyd, but the many African-Americans that have suffered the same fate as George Floyd. I'm thinking about a history of racial issues and my own experiences that didn't always sing of liberty and equality. I'm thinking about my Air Force career, where I was often the only African-American in my squadron, or as a senior officer, the only African-American in the room. I'm thinking about the pressure I felt to perform error-free, especially for supervisors I perceived had expected less from me as an African-American. I'm thinking about having to represent by working twice as hard to prove their expectations and perceptions of African-Americans were invalid. I'm thinking about the airmen who don't have a life similar to mine and don't have to navigate through two worlds. I'm thinking about how these airmen view racism, whether they don't see it as a problem since it doesn't happen to them, or whether they're empathetic. I'm thinking about our two sons. Now we had to prepare them to live in two worlds. Finally, I'm thinking about my historic nomination to be the first African-American to serve as the Air Force Chief of Staff. I'm thinking about the African-Americans that went before me to make this opportunity possible. I'm thinking about the immense expectations that come with this historic nomination, particularly through the lens of current events plaguing our nation. I'm thinking about how I may have fallen short in my career and will likely continue falling short living up to all those expectations. I'm thinking about how my nomination provides some hope, but also comes with a heavy burden. That's what I'm thinking about. I want to know what you're thinking about. I want to hear what you're thinking about and how together we can make it.
Good morning, General. General, do we have too many white officers in the Air Force?
Senator, what I really look at is the quality of all the officers that we have, and we look at the aspect of everyone who's qualified, meets the qualifications, is promoted. And
well, I would agree with you, but that answer is not consistent with your August 9th memo. In your August 9th memo, you said that you signed on to that there should be a reduction, essentially, of about 9% of the white officers. That's 5,400. We have 5,400, too many white officers. And this is the real impact, I think, of this desire of the administration. I'm saddened to see this in this memo, of this obsession with sort of race-based politics being interjected into our military. How did you come up with the percentage of 67.5% of the officers should be white? And how did you come up with 13% should be black? And how did you come up with 10% should be Asian? And how did you come up with 1.5% should be American Indian and Native Alaskan? How did you come up with 1% being Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander? And how did you come up with 15% of our officers should be Hispanic or Latino?
Senator, that is based on that memo is on application goals, not the actual makeup of the force. And those numbers are based on the demographics of the nation.
Okay, well, all right. There's 10% of our country is Asian American. So is that where you came up with it? Just a percentage of the population?
Essentially.
Because right now the actual percentage, I mean, this is where this is a ridiculous conversation, to be perfectly honest. Because why didn't you come up with, or are you going to come up with the percentage of the overall force? Did you contemplate that? Of how many, black Americans should be in the Air Force? Or how many Asian Americans should be in the Air Force? Did you contemplate the total force percentages?
Senator, what we looked at was the aspect of providing opportunities for anybody who wants to serve this cause.
Listen, if that were the case, if that were what was in this memo, I wouldn't be asking you these questions. But we have in a memo signed by you that you think right now there are too many white officers, and this is a blanket statement.
Yeah, so I want you guys to understand, before we get into the fake outrage, the boohoo whining and crying here, because obviously, again, the outrage here is fake. If a white general, right, a white leader in the military, put out a memo saying, hey, you know what, we got too many blacks, right? We got 20% black. The population of black people is only 13% in the country. We need to get rid of the black officers. We need to fire them based off race to impose some type of racial quota. Do you think that the left would advocate for a person like that to keep their job? You think the left would find that okay? You think they would be okay with cutting jobs of black people in order to meet racial quotas that match the population, right? Which they only do. They only do when white people are overrepresented, right? They only care about that when whites are overrepresented. However, when everybody else is overrepresented, they feel like, oh, that's okay. Like, that's totally fine, right? That is equality, right? It's just funny how that works. So, again, just keep that in mind, that this guy openly advocated for firing officers based off their race to meet a racial quota. That's what he advocated for. That is who's being fired. And leftists are outraged. They're upset because the guy being fired is black and they're trying to nail boohoo, whine, and cry racism instead of addressing the actual real issue in regards to why the guy was fired. It's quite simple. His ideology, okay, his way of running an organization, okay, was not consistent with what the President of the United States wanted. And the President of the United States is the commander-in-chief. It's really that simple, right? It's very simple. But again, according to these people, no. Trump just doesn't want any black people in the military. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Action is that the Trump Pentagon does not welcome black people. They're discouraging black people from joining. There's no home for women. We know also the CNO of the Navy, the Chief Naval Operations Officer, who's a woman, was also fired tonight. The commander of the
Air Force Vice Chief, we actually have the list up there. The Air Force Vice Chief was fired, the Lieutenant General was also fired, and then 3 JAGs were also fired.
Yes, so there was a purge of the lawyers, the senior lawyers, and the message there is that there's no rule of law left. It's a lawless purge. They removed the lawyers, and you have lawyers at every level of command. And it's a terrible message to send out tonight. And also, it's in the military, what we know is that we come from all different walks of life. We're different races. We have different economic backgrounds. We're different genders. And that there's no place for disrespect or a lack of respect for the dignity of soldiers.
One of the things to remember about CQ Brown, he was put in his previous position by Donald Trump, and Trump praised him when he did that. He actually was on duty today, as he always is. He was down at the border with our troops down there when this firing order came down. How can we look at this and not see this as just simply Pete Hegseth has decided that he is a symbol of DEI, and that's why he was fired?
I don't want to say it's a symbol of DEI. I mean, this is maybe surprising. No, we've been saying about this. Secretary Hegseth was talking about how he needed to go. But look at what Hegseth is talking about as the Pentagon as a whole. He is looking to completely restructure the approach that the previous administration had.
But that's
so he's
not
going to be
why
replacing a lot of people.
That's not why Hegseth said he should be fired. He said he should be fired because he was, in his words, involved in DEI. CQ Brown, as far as we know, there's been no indication that he's been fired for cause, that he did anything wrong, that he has some philosophical approach to war fighting that is different from the president's.
Wow. I would argue that, I mean, his adherence to DEI, okay, the fact that that's a part of his ideology in regards to staffing of the military, that, in my opinion, would classify as being a different kind of approach when it comes to fighting wars, right? Because you're not trying to hire the most qualified people, you're trying to meet racial quotas, okay? So that's a problem. And again, see how Abby Phillip here frames the firing in a very dishonest way, where she says, well, it seems as if he was just fired for being a symbol of DEI, aka he was fired for being black. That's what she's trying to say, right? That's what she's trying to say. He wasn't fired for being black. He was fired because his ideological approach is not consistent with that of the new administration. It's really that simple, right? It's really that simple. But again, CNN, they can't seem to figure that out. No, it has to be about the guy's skin color, okay? He was fired because he was black. Trump doesn't want any black people in the military, okay? It's fascinating stuff.
For the pleasure of the president, though. That is the nature of these roles. And so the president is clearly looking to go in a different direction at the Pentagon. So he's going to put a new team in place to do that.
Well, I thought you were going to play that other clip in that, I think that same podcast where Pete Hegseth basically questioned CQ's qualifications because he was black, and he said that in that podcast. That this is in the Associated Press story. His remarks saying, "I don't know if he's qualified. Maybe he is. Maybe he isn't," because he was black. So it's hard for anyone to read this, other than the fact, as you pointed out, that this is a very directed purge that has nothing to do with philosophy, that has everything to do with the faces of the military, which Pete Hegseth has said several times that he doesn't respect women soldiers and he doesn't respect people of color serving in these positions. And so by putting this out there, if you're in the military and you're a person of color, or even if you're just a person of color in this country, how are you supposed to feel seeing this?
Wow. Incredible stuff. Absolutely incredible. Because Pete Hegseth never said that he didn't respect so-called people of color in the military or in leadership positions within the military. That's not what he said. What he said was that this guy built his career based off race politics, right? He weaponized the race card in order to get to the top. And because of that, hey, we don't know. We don't know why he got the job, right? We don't know, did he get to where he's at because of his race, or was it because of merit? We don't really know. This is what Pete Hegseth said. Now, here's the thing. The unfortunate reality is that with DEI, with affirmative action, that is the type of criticism that successful black people have to face due to the fact that you have this stuff in the first place, right? If you didn't have DEI and affirmative action, black people who get to the top, their qualifications would not be questioned, right? Nobody would question whether or not they got it based off merit or based off skin color if you got rid of all these so-called diversity initiatives, right? If you just made it merit-based, right? If you stopped focusing on skin color so much, nobody would question the qualifications of a successful black person. But if you're going to have these programs in place, right, in order to give black people a booster seat, then yeah, people are going to say, hey, did you get the job because of your skin color, or did you get it because you earned it? Obviously, people are going to ask those questions, and people aren't wrong to ask those questions when you have these booster seat programs in place. If you don't want people's qualifications being questioned, then remove the booster seat. Remove the booster seat. That's all you got to do, but they don't want to do that, though, right? They don't want to do that. They want to get an advantage, right? They don't want to have to compete on the same playing field as everybody else, and then they want to get mad when people criticize it, right? When people call it out and say, okay, well, hey, I don't think you really earned it, right? You can't have your cake and eat it too, okay? If you want respect for earning it, then you got to earn it, right? You got to get rid of all of the diversity programs in the booster seats. So ultimately, at the end of the day, this guy did not lose his job because he's black, right? I mean, Trump fired white people too. Did they lose their jobs because they're white? Okay, you see how silly that sounds, right? He's not the only guy that lost his job. Other top generals got fired as well too. It is what it is. It's because there's a new commander-in-chief in town, and the commander-in-chief says, hey, I want the military to have a different ideology. I want it to go in a different direction. It's no different than having a new CEO, and the CEO comes in and say, hey, we want to go in a different direction, and we need people who are going to get on board with the new ideology, the new approach that we're going to take. It's the exact same thing that happens in corporate America, right? But it's only controversial here because it's the government, which again is why the government is so inefficient, because again, they don't do things in the same way that the private sector does, where it's like, hey, this type of stuff is totally normal, right? There's nothing controversial about saying, hey, we're not all on the same page in this organization. We got to get rid of some of the old people, right? Because we have a new CEO. Again, it's the exact same thing. The exact same thing. But hey, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.